All right. Hello. Hello, Facebook Live, Facebook friends, and those are on Zoom. This is Ellen Nash. Serve as the chair of the San Diego chapter of BAPAC, which stands for the Black American Political Association of California. And we thank you for being here today. We are going to be experiencing an awesome conversation with our own California Secretary of State, none other than Dr. Shirley Weber, who is a resident of San Diego, and we are so honored that that Dr. Weber has taken the time out this afternoon to spend with us at 2 o'clock. Listen, I know some of you are at work. You can't get on the Zoom call right now, but listen, we are on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. So when you're off work or you have time, you can always listen in, tune in to the full segment of this particular forum. And I'm going to go ahead and welcome our guest, elected official, our own California Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber. The Honorable Shirley Weber was appointed to the position of California Secretary of State by Governor Newsom in December of 2020, following the resignation of Alex Padilla, who Newsom appointed to become U.S. Senator following Kamala Harris' resignation to become the Vice President of the United States. Secretary Weber is the first African American to serve in this powerful constitutional office. Dr. Weber is the second in line of succession to the governor's office, behind the lieutenant governor. In appointing her to the office, Governor Newsom described Dr. Weber as we all know, as a fearless advocate with impeccable integrity and moral clarity. I now want to go ahead and turn it over to our guest moderator, who is Cheryl Alethea Phelps. Cheryl serves as the communications director of the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, San Diego and Imperial counties. And I just want to say that Cheryl Phelps is a great leader in the city of San Diego, as well as all over the United States. She has a history with some prominent positions in her own right, and we are so honored that she serves here as a moderator. And I want to go ahead and turn it over to you, Cheryl, at this time. Take it away. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ellen. And good afternoon, everyone. As Ellen said, my name is Cheryl Alethea Phelps, and we are so glad to have you joining us today. It is my great privilege to serve as moderator of another BAPAC San Diego Border Education Forum. The purpose of this nonpartisan convening is to give all people, particularly Black voters in our region, the opportunity to hear from both elected officials and candidates for public office. And our guest today happens to be both. I could not be more pleased to welcome you to this forum today, Secretary Weber. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about your office, broad strokes, and as we are talking, please feel free to lift up any particular part of your work that is relevant that I might not mention and that we might not know about. So as just again, real quick, the Office of the California Secretary of State is comprised of 6 divisions and employs more than 500 people. Most of us are probably aware that secretaries of state oversee and conduct and oversee state elections. And we probably know most about this because of the bad actors who've emerged in the 2020 general election. But the California Secretary of State's responsibilities also include maintaining a registry of lobbyists, for example, and administering state archives. And there's a number of different things that this office holder does. So a little bit about Dr. Weber. Secretary of State Weber was nominated to serve as California's 30th Secretary of State by Governor Gavin Newsom, as Ellen said, in December 2020. And then she was unanimously confirmed by the state Senate and sworn into office in January 2021. She is California's first Black Secretary of State and 3rd highest ranking elected official. So where'd she come from? Secretary Weber was born on a farm in Hope, Arkansas. Her father had only a 6th grade education and worked as a sharecropper before taking his young family to Los Angeles to escape the threat of lynching. She attended the University of California, Los Angeles, where she earned her bachelor's degree, master's degree, and PhD, all by the age of 26. She became a professor at San Diego State University at age 23, helped to found the Africana Studies Department, and served as its chair for 4 decades. She was elected to the San Diego Board of Education in 1988 and served for 8 years, including 2 as school board president. If you wouldn't mind muting, thanks so much. Appreciate that, Samuel. She was first elected to represent the 79th Assembly District in 2012 and re-elected 4 times. She didn't complete her 5th term, resigning instead to become our Secretary of State. And during her 8 years as a state lawmaker, she provided bold leadership on many significant social justice measures, which is why the ACLU is quite proud to sponsor this dialogue. 2 I want to lift up that we at the ACLU were very much involved with that could not have happened without the championship of Assembly Member Shirley Weber. 2 unprecedented bills to improve policing and public safety for all Californians. First was the groundbreaking California Act to Save Lives, which set new, higher standards for police use of deadly force. And the other, the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, which prohibits racial profiling and increases transparency and accountability of California's law enforcement agencies. Secretary Weber is the widow of California State Judge Daniel Weber, and she has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. And on a personal note, she makes really, really great sweet potato pie. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Please take 2 minutes to make an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. And I'm always pleased to be at home in San Diego with BAPAC. My husband was one of the founders of BAPAC many, many years ago, he and Willie Brown and others. So BAPAC has always had a very special place in our family and in my heart because of what its mission is and what it hopes to achieve in terms of giving African Americans a voice in the political process. And so I'm pleased that BAPAC it's gone through many changes, but it has risen again and has great leadership and is doing the kinds of things that it had been intended to do by those who started it many, many years ago. I think the first reception of BAPAC was actually held in my living room with Elihu Harris, who was chair of the BAPAC at the time. So I'm just pleased to know that BAPAC is alive and well and raising the issues that need to be raised during elections. As pointed out, I come into this position as Secretary of State after believing that I was going to retire from politics through finishing my term as the assembly member from this district, and had one more after the election in 2020, had one more term, which would have been this coming election. And now I have the unique challenge and opportunity to have another 8 years after this. So who will see what will happen. But I think, I accept this challenge because right now, the nation is in peril, and the secretaries of state positions across the nation now are becoming the most important position in this current election season that's coming up. Not only are we responsible for elections and all the things that I've mentioned in archives and filing of businesses and nonprofits, and it goes on, but we also are defenders of democracy because right now people are somehow trying to twist the responsibility of the Secretary of State and its constitutional responsibilities to make them basically subvert the will of the people with regards to voting. And so we're seeing that. We saw that in the 2020 election. We now have maybe 15 what we call election deniers running for Secretary of State in this nation who are saying that 2020 was a stolen election. These people are running on that platform. And that is dangerous when we consider what a democracy is supposed to be, and one person, one vote. So I had a challenge when I decided to leave the legislature. I thought about it, and people wonder, why are you leaving? You're doing such great work as a legislator. You've got the reparations bill. You've got things concerning education and police force and all those kinds of things and voting rights. But I thought, what better way to be an advocate and to fight for the right to vote and to advocate for it than to be Secretary of State. I served for a number of years, not only in terms of budget chair. I was the first African-American to actually chair a state budget when I chaired the budget in the state assembly. But I also, after that, chaired the well as chairing the budget committee in terms of law enforcement and their budget. And each time had an opportunity to try to make a difference, particularly for those who are often ignored in the process, to create opportunities for them to be able to vote and to vote their conscience and to vote without being encumbered. So it's really, really important as we talk about this. I accepted this challenge because I knew that we were going to be facing some really difficult times in the election process. And I wanted to make sure that we were heard and our voice was heard. And so with that in mind, I accepted the challenge from the governor to basically be Secretary of State and find myself obviously in the midst of a enormous challenge by things that are happening around us with regards to elections and making sure that California's elections are safe, but also that we have a voice in what's happening across the nation. I'm happy to answer your questions, engage in the conversation, because voting is extremely important.
Thank you, Secretary Weber, and I do agree wholeheartedly. So that we can establish a baseline of sorts, please answer the following questions: yes, no, or I don't know if you don't have an opinion to offer. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't know, it's just that you just don't have an opinion to offer at this time. So, do Black lives matter in your work as Secretary of State? Yes, no, or I don't know.
Sure, Black Lives Matter. Black lives have always mattered, particularly in the electoral process. So you just want a yes, no. You don't want me to answer, okay?
Well, we'll get to that a little later.
Black Lives Matter. Now, I don't know what you mean, the organization Black Lives Matter, or whether Black lives itself matters, but surely it does.
Okay. Does being the first Black Secretary of State matter in securing California's future as a fully participatory democracy?
I have to say yes, but like anything that's Black, I have to clarify that it's not just the person having the skin color. Like I say, all skin ain't my kin. We see that Thurgood Marshall said, "Be careful, because all snakes will bite, regardless of what the color is." So I think it is, and so I always define the term as Black versus African American being a psychology and a mindset much more than a skin color.
Thank you. That's a long yes, but thank you. Next one is systemic institutional structural racism a problem in our state?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Does it impede voter participation?
It can. It can.
Thank you. Are you knowledgeable about specific issues of concern related to voting rights and or access to voting raised by or affecting our region's Black communities that you can address in that office?
Sure, we are, and we look at the race and the data with regards to voting and opportunity and access and all those kinds of things. Sure, we do. Yeah.
Excellent. Now this has a long preamble because I have to give some data that comes from the Public Policy Institute of California, which I know you're aware of. They issued a fact sheet last month entitled California's Likely Voters. I'm going to drop it in the chat while I'm reading off these stats, if I can multitask. Among the findings of this report are that 8 of 10 eligible Californians are actually now registered to vote, which is a huge number, a huge percentage. And white voters comprise 40% of California's adult population, but 55% of likely voters. In stark contrast, Black Californians are 6% of the state's adult population and only 5% of likely voters. Making up 35% of California's adult population, Latinos are significantly underrepresented among the state's likely voters at 22%. And again, I just dropped it in the chat, and it's a very short fact sheet. All those points are lifted up. That said, though, BAPAC San Diego's Data and Research Division has shared information provided by the Political Data Intelligence, which is highly regarded as a reasonable source of data by researchers. And this report indicated that of the likely voters, only 25% of eligible Black Californians, eligible Black people who are eligible to vote, voted in the June primaries. And this compares to 24% of our Asian American population, 15% of Latino, 38% of white voters in the state. The percentage looked high, but if you also take into account the low number of Blacks who live in the state, That 25%, for example, is about 200,000 voters as compared to 24%, the closest percentage point among Asian Americans. That number is 3 times as much, more than 3 times as much, 636,000 votes. So even though the percentages might be equal, the Black presence in the electorate is not the same as all. So I just want to put that out there, and we'll come back to that with another question. But just looking at that turnout, that these numbers would turn out, what 3 best practices do you recommend to voter participation advocates to improve turnout in the November general election?
Well, one of the challenges in using data from the June primary is that it was a low voter turnout period. So it's hard to extract from it any kind of lessons, or we've been looking at it to find out, because the turnout was very, very low, and it may be, it was one of the lowest in history. And it may be, and it comes right on the heels of one of our highest turnouts, which was the recall election. And so there may have been a lot of things. We've had, I know one thing that we're suffering from, we did in the primary, we won't in this coming election, is we were suffering from voter fatigue. We had a lot of elections last year, and people participated, a lot of special elections. We had people, even in the 79th, in my district, there was a special election. We have 2 or 3 special elections going on, and I think they may have resolved some of them in LA, 2 or 3, with people changing positions and doing this and doing that. And so like we had folks voting twice for Alex Padilla's position and somebody else's. And so we've had just a tremendous number of special elections, much more than we've ever had before, which I was amazed, because when we look at the elections, generally when I took office, there would probably have been no elections at all until this coming November. And instead, I can't tell you the number of elections we've had, special elections, different places, people resigning, lots of people resigned, maybe because of COVID, I'm not sure, but we had Burke resigned in the middle of her term. We had Frazier resign in the middle of his, so we had just a lot of people in the assembly and resigning, and then some going on to Washington, like Kamala Harris and Becerra and so forth and so on. So we had
one question quick, just for everyone's edification. These are special elections occurring all over the state that we wouldn't necessarily know about here in San Diego, that you would actually have responsibility for conducting and overseeing.
I would have responsibility for them and working with the counties, but we had some in San Diego. We had some special elections here. So we've had elections, and all I'm saying is that I think what happens is that people get voter fatigue. Even though you're not living in LA, you hear about the LA election because it's highly controversial, and you see the results on TV and so forth and so on. So, and then everybody participated in the recall. And so, when you come down to the primary, a lot of people ask, well, are we voting again? For who? For what? Plus primaries generally, unfortunately, don't get a lot of turnout. And we've been looking to see why. And it may be because of how we changed our top 2 voters, that people know you don't get final results in a primary anymore. It wasn't that majority vote in a primary, you won your election. And now you can't win. Monica won, I got 60%. Monica got some other percentage, but you're not really picking the person. It's not until the fall. So we've had a lot of conversations about that. So I just simply say that simply because it's hard to extract a lot of lessons from our primary. You far more elections for questions and issues from the November election. But what we've done is we've tried to go into lots of communities where there is, and to try to help people understand the election. We've tried to, and it's hard to in California, because California is such a democratic state, especially to motivate people around the elections in terms of constitutional officers, because quite often, we had all the constitutional officers running who were still we only had one open position, which was really the treasurer's position. And so a lot of the energy around that, you knew Betty Yee, you knew so-and-so, so-and-so. Well, Betty Yee was moving on, but you knew Fiona Ma and this one and Tony Thurman. And so these things are people felt they were kind of laid out, so they didn't get energized around the elections. Many of them get energized around their local elections, and we still have local elections occurring right now. Some of the local elections like Oakland and around, they're still having elections concerning their mayor's election because they do it in an off time. And so we still have elections going on. And those are far more controversial and may end up with greater turnout than we had in the primary. But what those of us who are trying to motivate folks to go to vote and to turn out, it's extremely important that, and we've done this and we're figuring out how to do it better, is that to make sure people understand all their choices and options, because we've changed the process. Everybody gets a ballot in the mail, which you would think would make greater turnout. We're doing some things in communities to make sure people understand what it is to get a vote by mail and how to use it, how to effectively use it so that it does make a difference in terms of your opportunities to vote. We have some what they call VCA counties where people can vote for 11 days. And our VCA folks are out there now making sure people understand it as we've changed the process. And this will be the first full election that we've actually changed the process with everybody getting the vote by mail. We got the vote by mail during COVID because of a special initiative by the governor. But now it's been passed and it's in law, and so it's in effect and affects all of the policies and all the other things. And plus, keep in mind, it's been the November election. We don't do it anymore in the primaries, you know. So the
Could you repeat that? You jumped out for a second. We don't have what anymore?
We don't do initiatives in our primaries anymore. You know, we passed some legislation so that all the initiatives are coming to the general election. So in November, you not only get a chance to actually make the final decision about who's going to be elected in these positions, but you also end up basically making decisions about all these initiatives that are on the ballot. That's all the ads concerning the Indians and the this and the that, 26, 27. Because we passed legislation that does not allow people to put initiatives on the ballot in the primaries.
You know, but I would argue that does make our democracy more participatory, because with people who are likely voters tend to be older, more affluent, et cetera. If things end up as initiatives and people aren't voting, then they actually aren't having an opportunity to have a say.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying the turnout.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it's a bad thing.
Let me throw in a couple other questions, because some of the things that you're talking about are things that I'd like to flag for everyone, because what you're talking about is the opportunity to direct resources. The Office of the Secretary of State has resources that can go to low voter participation communities. Can you talk a little bit about what those might be and how communities access those?
Let me say this. First of all, we have resources for voter turnout quite often only when it's specifically allocated and the legislature wants it.
Okay.
We had tremendous resources given to us during the recall election. And that's why we had such a turnout. We had so many agencies and organizations, and many of the organizations are calling me now saying, are we going to get the same number of resources? Well, obviously, the recall was a very important piece for the legislature. And they allocate, I forgot what it's $32 million more than we normally to basically do outreach during the recall. Okay. That same resources is not there right now. There's not been an allocation of that type for outreach.
Even with our huge budget surplus, there's not an interest in ensuring voter participation?
There was an initiative to bring in, $100 million to community-based organizations to deal with voter turnout, and that initiative did not get pushed forward in the budget. Okay.
Did you back that initiative?
Yeah, we supported it. We worked with it. It wasn't our agency, it was a community agency. And so there was some difficulty with the policy, but I did not want to derail the policy. Okay.
Right.
So it had some challenges, and so it was not funded. It was not funded at all. And so we don't necessarily have separate, or I shouldn't say separate, we do. The organization does, the Secretary of State's office, but we are not given special allocations for regular. We weren't for this coming election. We were for the recall election. We did that. We got special allocations when the first vote by mail was made, because it required a lot of additional kinds of things. And so we do have an outreach office. It's not as extensive as we want. We are in the process of putting together a budget proposal that expands our outreach into those areas that it needs to go to. And so our staff gets out there, and we have about 4 people who actually deal with the whole state for outreach, and not only just elections, but all outreach. And so, like I said, we had a special allocation for outreach. We hired a special consultant to deal with outreach in the recall election. And we were able to get into all the various communities and put put resources into it. And we affected it because we had a great turnout for recall. Okay.
Mhm.
But people think we have this tremendous budget that allows us to go out into all these communities and do this work, and when we don't. Okay. Our people do extraordinary work just to make sure that certain things are done. But clearly, there's a lot more we can do. And we're working with some community organizations to address some of those issues that they want. And we're putting together a plan, hopefully, that may get funded by the state. But when there is an interest, the resources are there. Like I said, and I've had all of those folks who got lots of money from us to do work in the recall already calling me, thinking that was a standard allocation, and it was not. It was a special allocation for recall.
I can appreciate that since you're actually running, it can be difficult to advocate for these types of things and be a candidate at the same time.
Pay for it, I do. You just don't get it.
but that wasn't my question. I get that there's that tension there. But let's say that you win that a 4-seat term. You now have a mandate. And I'm looking at your campaign promises made on your website, and I will ask you a yes, no, I don't know. Is your vision for the Office of Secretary of State going forward reflected in your campaign promises?
It always is, yes. Yeah. It's reflected there. And like I said, I remind folks regularly, and as I was on call with some folks a minute ago, dealing with our efforts and our work with ex-offenders and making sure they're registered and outreach and those kinds of things. And we're working with a couple organizations with that. And that's what we want to do. And we have, like I said, we have folks who are working with us, outreach officers and other things like that. But we still have to get the allocation and the resources to accomplish those goals. And we have a whole finance office that puts forth what they call BCPs, which are budget change proposals.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you score these things, so people know how much what's being asked for, the budget for these things.
Yeah, and so we do that. We put together an entire organization that deals with outreach based on a number of things. One of the challenges we often face too is that we're often asked to do things that are unfunded mandates, and we know about that. So we often are asked to, legislation will come through and says, you've got to reach out to everybody with da 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 da, and then there is no dollars that follow that outreach, and so we then have to try to either using our own resources, but more importantly, we go and ask for additional resources, and sometimes it comes the additional resources because you've asked us to do things above and beyond what we're currently doing without any resources coming in to make it happen.
I hear you. It seems like all the various things that we talk about when we're speaking aspirationally about a fully participatory democracy, we're not as eager to invest in those things.
Well, I wouldn't say people aren't. What happens is that we have been successful in forcing many of our institutions that already exist to do the work that's necessary.
So it's a lot more of a compliance part, holding them accountable to what they're supposed to do.
Accountable. I mean, for instance, we're trying to make sure that all those who are released from prison are registered to vote.
Yeah, I'd like to actually spend a little bit more time on that one, if you don't mind.
No problem. And so we're pushing that issue one would on the outside would say that's a pretty simple process because you've got departments of parole and you've got prisons and you've got others who release people. And why can't people just simply register them as they go out the door, or give them the information about registration as they go out the door? And they can. But then when you talk to those with compliance, it's like, well, okay, we got to train them. We got to do this. We got to do that. I remember when I first got in the legislature, I was shocked because we got it eventually done through Alex Padilla. But the current Secretary of State did not. We had a piece of legislation that says, everyone who gets out of prison should be given their rights about voting and given a card to register to vote. At that time, we had to register by cards. And I was informed that it cost too much money to print the cards. And I thought, how could that cost too much money to print a card? And your job is to register people to vote. I mean, it was one of those kind of crazy conversations. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I got through Alex Padilla when he became Secretary of State, and I had told him what we had been informed. He immediately agreed with us that yes, it should never be an issue of printing cards or too many cards. We should be happy when we print a lot of cards because people need to vote. So the question often becomes in terms of compliance: do we have enough folks who are going to adhere to the rules and regulations, and then we have to obviously do things to force them to do that in order to make sure that what we're asking for, people are doing, and that the system, the bureaucracy doesn't clog down the system and doesn't get the things done that we know that we need to get done. So it's one thing as you discover when you live with a bureaucracy of about 600 employees right now. That is one thing to have a mandate to do something. It's another thing to get it done, and
Right.
we get it done. But it's not like everybody wakes up in the morning and says, "Yes, let's do this because this is great." You have to basically make it happen. Yeah.
So thank you for that and that thorough explanation. So a little bit more about the partnership that your office forms with local election officials. And the reason where I'm going with this question is we know that voter participation is different from county to county. Every county has a voter registrar's office. You have a relationship with each. This is an issue that I'm quite interested in. As you know, the ACLU covers both San Diego and Imperial counties. Your former legislative director is our director in that part of the region. And Imperial County, I think, is has second lowest voter participation, or perhaps lowest voter participation in the state. And you visited Imperial County. So what's the difference between your partnership with the Imperial County Registrar and the San Diego County Registrar, where the voter participation is so different?
I don't think there's a difference in the relationship, because when we, at least in those cases, oftentimes it has to do a lot with history, the history that was there before the registrar came in, the kind of because keep in mind, our registrar voters are under the control and most of them under the support of the board of supervisors. So they're appointed by that. So sometimes the policies of those agencies directly impact what happens to a registrar voter. Some of them are elected, a few are elected, but a lot of them are appointed by the board of supervisors. And oftentimes there is conflict and issues, and I'm not saying that's true of Imperial County, but clearly, past practice as you come in and people have things that they've always done. They have things that they've always ignored in terms of who people want to vote. And so when you come in, we went to Imperial County, Calexico recently, mainly because no one had ever been down there. They were excited that the first time any statewide officer had come to that area. And that they were excited about us coming with them. We registered a lot of young people to vote. We have some relationships down there to make sure that continues. Our staff is there. We sent more recently. I don't know, about 4 members of our staff to get there what is something called VoteCal, which is their computer system that has all the data in it to get it up to date and to basically get rid of a lot of the backlog that was there. So there's a lot of things that happen in these counties that either based on resources or sometimes because of their remote counties, they change leadership often because people, come there and stay and then they leave. And so we've been working directly with Imperial County to make sure that they are competitive with others. And when I say VoteCal is our system where all voters are listed. So say, for instance, if your VoteCal system is not up to date and someone comes in and wants to register the day of the election, you may not even know how to do it, but also you may not have resources to do it because your VoteCal system is not up to date with all the registered people in that region. Well, now it's up to date. It was behind, I don't know how many thousands of voters, but it's up to date now in terms of actually having all of the data there that's available that allows them then to let people register the day of elections and all those things that really go with VoteCal. So we've been Imperial County and was one of the lowest counties. I understand it's the lowest county, and that's why we went there to let them know that we are here, that we care about it, and that we plan to put our resources in bringing them up to be competitive with every other county. That I don't want them to be the last anymore. And so we have put in some resources and some staff, and our people are working with Imperial County to make sure that those folks know that we count, that they're not just sitting out there in the desert alone. That we expect to be there. We expect our staff to be there and our resources. So we have gone into places where people don't normally go. We go in some areas that are kind of difficult. People, have a tendency to focus on the big LA, San Francisco, those kind of San Diego areas. But we try to go into some of the smaller areas in Nevada County. We've gone and we try to go to Fresno. Kern County, those kinds of things with some of the community-based organizations to talk about elections. And we kicked off our real campaign on elections in Fresno over a year ago, where we had Dolores Worther working with us because of the challenges in Fresno. And we continue to do that. I'll be in San Bernardino and Riverside next week. Those are small areas that we have to go into to make sure that those folks are registered, that we know that they count. We're going into some of the schools to register high school students in Riverside. And
like I said, by this time next year, I've got to be out of here.
We're going to need to mute audience.
Well,
Enough said now.
Dennis, I would need you
be
to.
in touch for your offsite party, because I'm not going to do any parties.
Me and John are gonna throw.
I'm
our-
sorry,
That's what I'm saying. Keep me in touch on that one, because you guys are my last best.
I don't know how, I can't actually mute the person who's speaking, but I'm asking all people who aren't in this conversation as listeners. I need you to be, there we go. Thank you. All right, you were saying?
yeah, but I'm just saying we've gone and we're going in those areas because a lot of those areas have not been gone in before. And so we're looking at the data of where the lowest voters are, the lowest voter turnouts, whether or not, and we're discovering that some of these counties need additional assistance. And we sent our staff in. And I've been there personally. I went there personally to meet with the schools, with the registrar of voters, to meet with the board of supervisors, city council, and to let them know that we're here to help. We see you. You're not just sitting out here in the desert doing what you want to do when you want to do it. That you are part of a larger system. And they've got a new registrar voter in Imperial County. So we hope that will help, and we will continue. As I say, my staff was there last week, helping them. We sent in staff so they would have additional hands to basically get all of their systems ready for November. And so.
Are there places in the state where we are seeing large groups of Black Californians who are disenfranchised in any way?
The interesting thing is that that's hard to say because we don't have large pockets of Black people.
That is true.
So when someone tells me there's a large pocket, I start looking for it because our folks are really scattered. When you look at the districts, I don't know if there's a district that's majority Black anymore in the state. We don't have majority Black schools anymore in California, not even in San Diego and in LA. So our population is relatively dispersed. You will find maybe 20%, 30% Black folks in certain areas. What we have done that's a little different is that we have generally after election, we look at the data, we see who voted, who did not vote. And so we discovered that we didn't have a system to identify who was actually voting in terms of any other group other than white and Latino. That was it. And that was the data that we got. So we have partnered with UCLA now, and UCLA's Bunch Center and their research center.
The Ralph Bunch Center, thank you very much, right?
So we partnered with them. We finally have a new system, and I'm meeting with them again, but they delivered the data for the last elections to us that can pretty much predict how many Black folks are actually voting and identify them based on the voter rolls more than anything else. And so and they're blending it with the census data. So it's a little different than what we've done in the past, as well as trying to bring out the Asian population and what have you. So we get a real sense of who's actually voting in California, where the pockets are, who's not, so forth and so on. And we know that one of our largest, our lower voter turnout in terms of race, basically is among Latinos in terms of the population and the actual turnout. And I met with our Chicano caucus, the statewide caucus, and they're supposed to be working with us to develop some systems that assist with the voter turnout in terms of Latino communities, figuring out what the issues are, why they're turning out in much lower numbers in their population. So some of it has to do with voter suppression, and we find out some of that in some of the middle California areas. But we're working on that, as well as we met the other day with, and they were here in San Diego, our Asian population that's been doing a great job in disaggregating the data. They've got a great coalition of those working on the voters in San Diego, but also around the state in terms of turning out the Asian population. So we're kind of excited about the fact that they are working, they're working with our outreach team so that we can basically make sure that whatever they need in terms of getting to those populations, we can provide assistance in our own staffing, as well as resources and materials and things on our website to make sure that they know what it is. And of course, our lowest voter turnout that we're discovering, of course, is our students between the ages of 18 and 25. And we are engaged right now with a lot of young people and working with the universities and places like that to register individuals on campuses. We've got a lot of agreements signed with universities to try to increase the number of students that are registered to vote and students who are voting. The students have a competition statewide. And
Inspired to Vote? Is that what you're talking about?
no, Inspired to Vote is more high school. Our
Mhm.
student voter project, and it has
Tell us about that.
it has a ballot board, and all of those work together. But our universities, Stanford, I think, is leading right now in terms of voter registration. Last time it was Chico State, and Chico State, they won in the recall, and then the last election, 2020, Fullerton won. They had the largest number of percentage of their students registered to vote and who actually voted. So we have a huge kind of voter project that it works with Rock the Vote and a host of others. Every state,
Gotcha.
state system, and many of our UCs are part of a major statewide competition called on the ballot board to see who can register the most students, who can turn out the most students to vote. And our UC campuses have voter ballot boxes on their campuses with an agreement that we have. So we've been trying to energize our students to vote. We've got some young people who are doing lectures up and down the state to help them to vote. I think I'm at Cal State, Poly Pomona, in another week or so, basically dealing with the issue of voting in some of their rallies and projects that they have that they're working on. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So traditionally, voter registration of Black voters occurs in our churches. So what do you see happening across our state in terms of efforts to improve, increase, engage Black Californians in voting?
Well, our churches, we have during the primary, before the primary, we hit, I don't know how many churches every Sunday. We were in and out of churches in San Diego, in LA, San Francisco, and around the Bay Area. And then we met with a number of churches. We had a number of town hall conversations with many of our churches. We had one with all strictly with AME, and encouraging all of them to register. And this was a statewide organization that came to us, and we worked with them to do that. We also have worked with the just the overall statewide alliance. Michael Moore was working on that, and so he helped us with a lot of that. So we've been working with the churches and pulling them together to register people at their churches. Clearly, when we go to churches, we recognize the fact that most of the churches are half or third full or less because of COVID. This stuff is online, so we are talking to them online. So the efforts of the churches are, but the ministers are still very committed, and they're looking at the data at the churches, and we're figuring out ways to get them to vote. And many of them had pretty decent turnout when they reported who voted as much as they could from their churches during the primary. I mean, a lot of them were there. But keep in mind, people don't go to church like they used to,
Yeah, that's true.
Reach a lot of folks, but it may not be the center that it used to be. But nonetheless, we reach them, we get information to them. And physically, I go to a number of them, sometimes hitting 4 and 5 churches on a Sunday. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So I want to circle back to your yes or no questions and dig a little deeper, because you definitely had some more insight in some things that you wanted to share on some of those. But I want to give a preface there that your appointment and your unanimous confirmation were historic.
Mm-hmm.
Period, end of sentence. If elected statewide to a 4-year term, your role, your work is potentially consequential for this diverse state. We're the most populous in the nation, and for the nation as a whole. So this is my yes or no question, but I wanted you to enlarge on it, as I know you will. I don't know if I'm assuming that secretaries of states have conferences and retreats or whatever. So yes or no, do you throw some side eye at some of these election deniers who are in the position that you have or who may aspire to? How do you, in the role that you're in and that we anticipate, given how our electorate will play out, you'll be in for the next 4 years, how do you then become emblematic of what full, fair voter participation is? What's your power there? What's your influence over what's happening in our country?
Well, the unique thing is, yeah, being the Secretary of California, and being, I think I may be the only African American actually voted into being secretary. There are two other sisters who are appointed by governors and don't have the same level of authority because they don't have a constituency. They have to do pretty much what the governor's wishes are, and I don't have to do that because I'm an independent constitutional officer, even though appointed by Gavin Newsom. I appreciate that. But people saw that Gavin asked me to do something. I said no, when he wanted to have his Democratic designation put on the ballot. So he understands my independence as an individual, and as an elected official. It does. It has a significant amount of weight, mainly because California is a state that's fairly secure about its elections. Now, we have our election deniers. We have people who constantly sue us every other day to create more confusion. We have people who attack individuals. I've had folks to file a lawsuit against me for $70 million personally, try to put a lien on my property. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff that happens. So we have all of those things that occur. But the unique thing in California is that we have a legislature that's not going to do the crazy stuff. Where in other states, you have legislators trying to make a point. They'll come up with crazy ideas of how to suppress people from voting, all those kinds of things, whether they believe it or not, but they think the public wants it. If you notice, we haven't had that level of legislation in California because California is a supermajority state in terms of Democratic policies. Even my friends who are Republicans don't have crazy ideas about how to suppress people from voting. We just don't. So that puts us in a unique position, at least me in a unique position of being from a state that allows me to raise those critical issues about voter suppression, about voting rights, the kinds of things that I see, and to call them out. And I have done that in writing editorials and in papers across the nation, being on TV with the different kinds of perspective with regards to what is happening, with making sure that those who think they're going to subvert the process know that my office, as well as the Attorney General's office, will prosecute them to the full extent of the law. This is not a be boys are boys kind of attitude. If you bum rush the Registrar of Voters office and some other things that people try to do, this is not a boys will be boys attitude. That is a violation of the law. So we make those things very clear, and we're able to do that in California. In addition to that, it also gives me an opportunity to help the other states. I guess I'm going to something on Monday where I am actively involved in raising money for those who are fighting the election deniers across the nation. And
on the ballot, who will be on the November ballot?
The ballots, and I'm energizing those who are funders and who are wealthy folks in Los Angeles to do this, because even though in California we are relatively secure, somewhat, the bottom line is we're still in the United States. And when someone decides that they're going to create some laws and regulations in Washington or anywhere that have a tendency to say, well, people can vote in a state, but the state legislature has the authority to determine whether or not the votes are correct or not. And they can substitute their will for the will of the people. And that's some of the legislation that's been passed. That certain legislators can substitute their will for the people. So if vote a certain way, then they could go to Sacramento and say, okay, yeah, we know you voted for so-and-so, but we don't think that was a good election. So because the legislature is voting a certain way. So it makes your vote merely a recommendation and not a statement of fact. And so that having been the case, we fight those things. I'm a member of what is it called, the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. There's also a group called States United. All of us are dealing with issues with Democrats and Republicans, with those that are trying to do a good job as a Secretary of State and defend the Constitution and its rights. So it gives us a unique position, because when I talk to others across the nation, they are in peril. They're just distraught over what is happening. Secretaries of State don't have security. So in those states, which means people come to their house, bang on their doors, threaten their children, take pictures of their families, and they have no security at all. One Secretary of State was told, well, if you want to be secure, you need to go live in the governor's mansion with his family, as if he's some servant or something to live with somebody else, because they will provide them with no security whatsoever. That's not true in California. All constitutional officers have security. So So what happens is that it gives me a unique opportunity to not only represent California, but put a stake in the ground, because as California goes, so goes the nation. And to really make sure that these issues are clear and that we are unapologetic about it, and to raise these issues about voting across the nation, which I have done and continue to do in editorials, as well as working to raise funds and being actively engaged with the national organization to make sure that our votes are secured not only here, but across the nation. So it is a unique opportunity because of California's position, being the largest state in the union, having the largest, our economy, we're the 5th largest in the world. And if not in the United States probably would fall in its ranking among other states with regards to California's economy. So given all those things, it gives us a unique opportunity. Every statewide elected official has a unique opportunity to do more than just simply represent California.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the one question that we did get in the chat. So we do have a few minutes if people want to drop in some short questions. This one, you can perhaps put on your previous hat, or if you can answer it wearing the hat you are now, that would be great. We've been fighting for better education and educational outcomes throughout our history of freedom in America. Still in pursuit, and it seems like we're not making the gains we need. What's the path forward to obtain learning justice for our Black children in California?
Well, it's interesting you asked me this question, because I just left the meeting with the county superintendent of instruction, who still calls on me as a friend to hear his projects, see what's going on, and hopefully push forward. Most of you know my daughter is now the assembly member in my seat in the 79th Assembly District, and I'm proud of the fact that she has introduced a couple of pieces of legislation, one dealing with issues of social justice with regards to young people, and keeping folks from being suspended and expelled from schools, which is generally affects our kids most. But also the funding of resources for African American children, something that I fought for many years, and we once got $300 million, but it wasn't ongoing, and it was very controversial and what have you. But now we're at the point where we will probably end up with $300 to $700 million every year for the lowest performing kids, which are African American kids, and it will be ongoing funding. And so,
congratulations. And congratulations to your daughter.
That will be placed in the governor's budget. He's agreed to it. He's got a document, and it will be in the governor's budget when we're fighting for it in January, and she's fashioning the issues that are there. So finally, after 4 or 5 years of constantly fighting it, a little bit here, a little bit there, she took it on the challenge, and I was very proud of the fact that we're finally getting kind of done after all the constant pressure with the same bill over and over. So we're doing some things, but I tell people that education is really the heartburn for me, because I know it is a linchpin for success. That without a strong education, it's going to be difficult for our kids to be successful. I know that. So difficult, if not impossible. Let me say that. And so it demands constant attention. We have to pick people who run for office who believe in our kids. All of them, not just the ones that are in our neighborhood, but throughout the nation. I was picked a part of the King Hunt Institute. And I was picked a part of it because they said, we want to pick elected officials who we think should become governor, who are going to be advocates for education. And I said to them, I'm not running for governor. So he said, yeah, but we never know. I said, no, we
but you're third in line, something can happen.
The other two people, please. So anyway, in the long conversation, because what pushes us forward is leadership at the top, but equally what makes leadership at the top is the people at the bottom.
That's right.
We have to find folks at the bottom, and we are part of that, who are going to push unapologetically for our children. Critical. I mean, that is it. And so it requires constant attention. Someone says it's constant, just put it in, constant attention to get us where we want to go without apologies, without listening to other. One of the things I learned when I was on the school board, people would come up to the dais and say, my little Johnny, and they'd be from La Jolla somewhere. My little Johnny needs to be in so-and-so, boom, dee boom, dee boom. And you could say, well, ma'am, that's really nice. But, you know, we have to consider the fact that our children, and they stopped, wait a minute, hold up. I'm talking about little Johnny. I ain't talking about nobody else's kids. Whatever these people do is fine with me, but this is for mine. And these people are unapologetic. You could tell them, you know, well, you know, if I give your kid something to eat, 5 other people gonna starve. This person say, let them starve. You find something for them to eat. But meanwhile, little Johnny gotta eat. Unapologetic about the success of their kids. And we have not been strong enough to be unapologetic.
But actually, we've been socialized, haven't we, to give away our part. You know, we concede to diversity as opposed to saying we want this.
We've been socialized to take care of everybody but ourselves. And
so we're at the end, and this is already getting good again. But we're at the end. So let me ask this: that little girl from Hope, Arkansas, now third in line in the most populous state in the U.S., 5th global economy, all of that. What would you tell that young person who wants to be Secretary of State? Let's say that young person is 22. College graduate, what's the next thing?
You know, I live by, first of all, I live by certain principles because I never aspired to be Secretary of State. I always aspired to make a difference. And I tell anybody who's going to run for office, particularly if you're in a position like this, above all things, to thine own self be true. Someone gave me that when I graduated from high school, because I think that is critically important. We have too many Black folks who decide they want to run for office because it makes them important. It makes them significant. You got to be important before you run. You have a sense of internal importance. Most folks know I was important before I became Secretary of State, before I became a school board member, before I, you know, all those things, because I was determined to make a difference. And nobody was going to buy me off for some small piece of stuff. And so we need people, you know, we've often got people, but we need people who really, and I say this because I work with a lot of Black elected officials. We need people who are going to stand firm for us, period. We're unapologetic for us. And often, and that doesn't mean at the expense of other people. You know, when I got getting ready to get to school, but one of the school board members I met with while I was running, I met with all of them. And she said, well, I've only heard one bad thing about you. And I said, what is that? She said that you are really in favor of Black kids. The one bad thing. Now, can you imagine this?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that too.
And I looked at her because I could only imagine what she was thinking in her brain. I said, well, did they tell you that I hate white people? She said, oh my God, no. I said, because I don't. That's not the issue. I said, simply because I'm advocating for kids who look like me, because nobody else is, doesn't mean I'm not helping everybody else. And so she had to back up and think about it. But I said, why do you think that's so bad? You know, so because it's normal to advocate for yourself and then to advocate for others as well. And so it was interesting that, and so what happens is that people were apprehensive when I came in the school board, those who were staff and assistants, all these people were apprehensive to ever talk about, we gonna help Black kids. And so every time I get ready to talk, I say, well, I'm gonna say something that y'all don't like to hear, but it has to start with the B word, and it's about Black kids. You know, I mean, you have to raise this issue consistently, and you have to support those people who are going to do that. You can't have these milquetoast leadership people who kind of come in with this broad view of saving the world and have done nothing to help Black kids. You know, my standard when people ask me about different people that are want to be this, superintendent, whatever it is, and I say, you know, this person's been in a district for 25 years. What have they ever done for Black people? I want to know. I know you've gotten certificates and credentials, and you've done certain kinds of things. But I want to know, what have you done for Black kids? You've been.
Let me ask you this, because we do have to go. What do you want? What's that one sentence? What do you want people to say you've done for Black Californians?
Well, I hope people say that not only have I been courageous and unapologetic and all those kinds of things, but I've been unyielding in my devotion and commitment for change. That the things I've done have not been about me, but have been about them. And that I've never been afraid to take on the hard issues of California. And it's interesting enough that they weren't that hard after all, because people just needed to raise the issue on our behalf. So if people say anything about me, I hope they say at some point that, you know, this woman fought every battle that was right. She won some, she lost some, but you never questioned her integrity in the battle.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you for your time and your insightful words. And your years and years and years of public service as an academic, as a legislator, and 18 months as our Secretary of State. And thank you, audience, for your careful attention. Thank you in advance for voting in these critical midterm elections and for voting your values. I will now turn the program over to BAPAC San Diego President Ellen Nash for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, California Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, for that powerful presentation and that powerful conversation that we've had. And of course, our moderator, Cheryl Althea Phelps, for being here today. And it is now 3:01. I just want to announce that BAPAC San Diego will be launching our inaugural We Are the Margin of Victory, which by the way was coined by Dr. Shirley, a voter turnout campaign as of today. We stand willing, BAPAC to vote as my birthday present on November 8th of this year. And we're going to launch that campaign, not just for this campaign, but we're going to go as far as we need to, because we have to go all the way to 2024. So this is a campaign season. As Dr. Weber said, we may get fatigued and tired, but the last time I checked, Black folks can stand in line for hours and hours and hours. You may try to suppress our vote, but we'll do what we have to do in order to make sure that we win elections and our voices is heard. I want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Again, if you didn't make it on the Zoom call, it's going to be on Facebook Live and also on YouTube, as long as technology exists. And thank you all, you attendees, for being here today. I love you all. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.